the US gives this good talk about being tolerant and respecting free speech and etc. But essentially, when push comes to shove, it becomes incredibly violent. China's approach is always positive, it's upbeat, it's asking for respect, peace, cooperation, win-win, common destiny of humanity. I mean, this is just all of it is positive messaging, trying to bring out the best with the United States. I think it's very clear that the United States is escalating to war with China. It is looking for war. It is doing information warfare. It's shaping the theater of war, shaping the environment, and it's constantly provoking. The US ruling imperial elite would rather see the end of the world than the end of their imperial privilege and power.
Pro-Palestinian protests are spreading across U.S. campuses like wildfire. Students from leading universities like Columbia University, New York University, UC Berkeley, University of Southern California are in solidarity encampment, demanding the U.S. government to stop its support for Israel's war in Gaza. What led to such a mass student movements in the U.S.? U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken took a 3-day visit to China. He met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. What were the outcomes of this visit? Blinken wants the so-called fair treatment to American companies. Yet during the same time when he was in China, U.S. President Joe Biden signed a bill that may ban TikTok. The bill will give 1 year to TikTok to divest from its owner ByteDance to an American company. Is that the fair treatment he wants from China as well? Police brutally cracked down on U.S. students' peaceful protest, arresting more than 500 students and professors. Israel's war in Gaza led to tens of thousands of innocent children, women, civilians being killed in Gaza. Yet facing these human rights violations, Antony Blinken raised concerns about the human rights situations in China. KJ Noh, geopolitical analyst based in San Francisco, is joining me today to discuss the news of the week. KJ, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
I still remember that last year during November, I was in San Francisco. You're leading me to see the cities. Thank you so much. I wish we can meet either in the US or in China soon. But I really want to hear your insights on this. First, it's probably, let's talk about the student protests, students' mass movement, because San Francisco is a major city that is seeing this students' mass movement. Tell us what's it like in San Francisco? What's it like in UC Berkeley and the USC in Los Angeles? Is that violent like some Western mainstream media described?
Well, I mean, there are massive protests happening all across the United States, in particular centered around the universities. But this has actually been building over months. Remember, there have been street protests. At one point, 500,000 people came out on the streets to protest the Israeli genocide of the Palestinians. Code Pink has been constantly, going to Congress and, confronting these Congress people that are, funding the genocide. And then more recently, it started in Columbia University, Columbia Barnard University, and then it spread like wildfire to all of the, to many colleges on the East Coast and now also on the West Coast. Most recently, just a few hours ago, I was at UC Berkeley. There were probably close to 100 tents pitched on every square inch of grass around Sproul Hall, which is where traditionally the students hold protests, and it's also the place where the free speech movement started. And the students are both outraged and heartsick. We have been seeing for months, this incredible, endless stream of atrocities. And the students are heartsick and outraged, and they feel like they have to make a stand. They have to say something. And, the last time you and I spoke, which was in November, the casualty count was 11,000 Gazans. And right now it's 4 times that. And that just speaks to the fact that, this is unending, despite the best efforts of some of the countries of the global south, despite the best efforts of China speaking out at the UNSC and at the UN. The US seems determined to enable this continued genocide. And because of that, I think people of conscience all over the world, but in particular students, are deciding to speak out, literally throw their bodies on the machine, as we used to say, because sometimes it is so odious, so despicable that you have no other choice but to try and do something, try anything. I think the actions of Aaron Bushnell, who immolated himself, who set himself alive on fire and perished from that, I think that was also a large trigger. But I think in many, many ways, people are reflecting inside themselves the question that Aaron asked, what are you doing right now? There's a genocide happening. Whatever you're doing right now, you need to reflect on that.
Hmm. And we saw countless videos, images of how police violently, brutally crack down the students who were protesting peacefully. I think to us it's more interesting to see the hypocrisy of US government, US politicians, the blatant hypocrisy, because when riots took place in places like Hong Kong in 2019, they were really rioters because they were beating pedestrians, citizens, lit a street cleaner on fire. They were attacking the police. But the US politicians supported those kind of rioters in places like China, in places like other countries. And Nancy Pelosi even described that riots as a beautiful sight to behold. Yet when it happened in the United States, and it's not violent. The students, like you described, students are set up camps and were dancing, very peaceful. They are just demanding the country to stop its support towards a genocide. Yet you see how brutally they crack down this protest, and some senators even went to the universities to tell the students to go back home, stop wasting your parents' money. But they don't mention they are wasting the taxpayers' money in war, in genocide. So how do you see this completely double standards, the completely different attitudes of some US politicians?
Well, hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. And we're seeing a lot of tribute being paid right now. Essentially, the United States is captured by its plutocrats. It is a country run of, by, and for plutocrats, this ruling imperial elite, and they see fit to do as they wish. And over this very narrow veneer of quote unquote free speech, and whatever notion of justice and human rights. Underneath it, there is an extraordinary repression that happens. Just on the issue of Palestine alone, for decades, inside the academy, it really has been taboo to speak about Palestine or to speak for Palestinian rights. Even if you were a tenured professor, if you were an endowed chair, you would still be very, very careful to say anything that criticized Israel or advocated for the Palestinians. It's a third rail. You cannot touch it. So don't let anybody tell you that, that there is some notion of free speech in academia or even in the United States. Completely taboo. You cannot touch. You will be electrocuted immediately. But inside this context, as I said again, the atrocities are so odious. They're so heart-wrenching. And I think people simply cannot stay still and witness what is going on. So they feel the need to speak up. So when we see that they speak up peacefully, And I emphasize peacefully because, I was just on campus a few hours ago on UC Berkeley. It's beautiful people, beautiful energy, people speaking, with conviction and heart, but completely peaceful. And I believe that that was the case with almost all of the other protests as well. For example, in Colombia, they sent in riot troops. The first time in 60 plus years. At USC, same thing. They sent in, scores, dozens, hundreds of riot troops, arresting people. They were beating professors, they were throwing them to the ground. And we see this happen from time to time. Once again, the US gives this good talk about being tolerant and respecting free speech and etc. But essentially, when push comes to shove, it becomes incredibly violent. We saw that on UC Berkeley during Occupy Cal. They beat the poet laureate and endowed chair, the professors. They were beaten because they linked arms. And the UCPD said that that was an act of aggression. Linking your arms is an act of aggression that merits a beating down. They haven't done that yet at UC Berkeley, but it's very possible. Certainly, they're doing incredibly violent things across the United States on college campuses. And this contrasts immensely with, for example, Hong Kong or China, where the protests were treated with kid gloves. When there were protests in China with the for various reasons, I don't know that there's any student that was arrested. Certainly, there were no mass beatings. But here, this is routine. If you step out of line, and certainly if you do an encampment, it's just a matter of time before they will come in and they will suppress you with extreme force. The fact is, administrators hate encampments because it allows people to get together, talk, and really educate each other. And they do not want that around Palestine. No education, no truth telling. This is also one of the reasons why they want to ban TikTok, because it's one of the sources where people are seeing the true picture of what is happening in Palestine.
Since you mentioned TikTok ban, let's talk about it because in the last week, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited China. And during his time in China, one thing he mentioned is he demands fair treatment for American companies in China. And just the day the rioters published that article, U.S. President Joe Biden signed a bill that will ban TikTok in the United States. Basically, they give a 1 year to TikTok to divest from its owner ByteDance to force a sale to sell TikTok to an American company. Otherwise, TikTok will be banned in the United States. And the CEO of TikTok, Shou Chu, said they are not going to sell that. So, I mean, you are in China demanding fair treatment for American business, yet you're planning to ban TikTok. So I saw many comments on Twitter said, well, are you demanding that China to ban Apple, to ban Tesla as well? Or what do you mean by fair treatment? Or are you demanding that China to arrest some of your Apple CEOs, like how you treated Huawei's CEO's daughter, Meng Wanzhou? So, I mean, again, this double standards. But like you mentioned, many of the the horrific videos, what happened in Gaza, this information are extremely limited on U.S. mainstream media. But people, especially young people, can see that from TikTok, especially nowadays, more than 90% of US teenagers are getting their information from social networks. And among them, TikTok is the #1 source to get information. So can you share with us your views on this ban on TikTok?
Well, it's exactly as you say, it's hypocrisy beyond belief. It's a double standard. It's absurd. So the United States, says that China has to improve its, conditions for US companies. And then it not only bans TikTok, but it says that it has to sell itself to US owners, or it will, or else it will be completely banned. Well, first, I mean, already a large percentage of TikTok is already owned by US stockholders. So, there's I think it's nearly close to 50%, which is already held by the US, but that's not enough. They want everything. They want the company, and they want the technical expertise and the algorithm. And this is literally like it's a mugging. This is not free trade. This is not negotiation diplomacy. This is like a mugging. Can you imagine if China said that Apple or Microsoft had to surrender itself to Chinese authorities? It had to sell itself to China. Otherwise, it would be completely banned. The world or the US would be in an uproar, right? I mean, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. They would be so angry. And yet the US seems to think that this is okay. Now, the pretext that they use again is that, TikTok is a national security threat, which is absurd and ridiculous. It stores all of its data inside the United States, in Texas. They spent over $1 billion building out servers and creating systems in order to do that. And after having done all of that, or done everything by the book, in order to please, quote unquote, or assuage US absurd allegations, now they're saying they have to sell it or else. And this is just, blackmail. This is gangster type activity. But this is the level to which the United States has descended. It simply has no moral standing. It simply, decides that TikTok is, because it cannot control TikTok completely. The US wants to have a hermetic control of the information space. That's how it manages to control its population, because they're so propagandized and so, kept within a tight seal of state-controlled propaganda. And TikTok is a tiny crack in that. And so because of that, they feel like we cannot let this happen. We have to take it over. So that's one reason. The other thing is that they can't compete with TikTok. It's simply better technology. It's more popular. It's the most downloaded app in the United States. So instead of competing properly, the American tech companies, which are in bed with the US national security state, are saying that, make them sell it to us. It's what we call the Tonya Harding approach. Tonya Harding was an ice skater. She had an opponent, Nancy Kerrigan, because she didn't feel like she could beat her, on the ice skating rink. She hired somebody to break her opponent's knees. I mean, this is the kind of gangster-like behavior that the United States is engaging in. And of course, it has to do with part of a larger approach, which is essentially the US is waging economic war against China. It's waging trade war, economic war, tech war, lawfare, cultural warfare, information warfare, political warfare. On all fronts, it's waging warfare, what we call hybrid war. And all of this is essentially escalation in order to prepare the ground for kinetic war. I think it's very, very clear the US is moving towards kinetic war against China. It's certainly preparing for it. It's doing information warfare. It is shaping the environment, that is making the environment ready for war. And then it is exercising constant provocations. And so all of this has to be taken into consideration, even as you see Anthony Blinken come to China and supposedly make nice for a few hours before he starts mouthing off and attacking China again.
Yeah, exactly. But it feels like US this information war is, well, not going very well. That's how we can see the students in the United States are not buying this. That's why they're mobilized for this encampment. So why are they losing?
Well, one of the reasons why they're losing is because the lies that they're spewing are just so absurd, right? I mean, you say that there is no genocide happening, and you're telling, millions of people around the world that what you see with your own naked eye, the evidence of your own senses, is wrong, that there is no genocide. This is not a genocide. That's absurd. You cannot do that. People are not that stupid. And so they see how extraordinary, absurd the lies that they're being told are. Likewise, the United States is telling an equally absurd lie, even as it denies the genocide in Gaza. Anthony Blinken is going around saying, look, there is a genocide in Xinjiang. Okay. I mean, this is absurd, right? There's no genocide. 200 million people visited Xinjiang last year. Not a single one of them saw a single ounce of evidence of genocide. There's no evidence. The population has increased sixfold. Lifespan has increased 150%. GDP is constantly rising, and anybody can go and visit anytime. So it's clear that this is a lie. But the ruling imperial elite are so wedded to this notion that they're going to control the world. And they're so wedded to the idea that if they tell enough lies, if they just keep on repeating the lies enough, that will seep in and become part of the kind of ambient mental landscape in which you bathe, and then you'll start to believe it. And they've done this before. They said that Saddam Hussein was responsible for 9/11. That's why we had to attack him. They've said, all kinds of lies, especially the ones they're saying around China right now. But this is how they operate. They believe that if they just keep telling a lie and keep on repeating it over and over and over again, and they control the media, which they do. They control the social media channels, except for a small crack with TikTok. They believe that they can essentially indoctrinate, propagandize, mystify people into believing what they say and go along with them. Well, that tiny crack has happened with Palestine because it is so absurd and so heart-wrenching and so atrocious. And also because they don't have 100% control of the media, because they're little pieces that are leaking out through other media and through smaller channels. And that's why they are up in arms, and that's why they're doubling down on the repression.
Let's talk about Blinken's visit to China. So after the visit, China released a 5-point consensus that reached between China and the United States. So the 5 points basically address that both countries agreed they will maintain high-level talks in terms of diplomacy, military, finance, and most importantly, they will maintain people-to-people exchanges, cultural exchanges. I think that's very important for people from both countries. That's a good sign. And what Chinese President Xi Jinping told Antony Blinken is also very important, because he said the US should look at China's development in a positive light. China and the United States should be partners rather than rivals, help each other succeed rather than hurt each other, seek common grounds, reverse differences. And most importantly, President Xi told Blinken that the US should honor words with actions rather than saying one thing but doing the opposite. And we saw so many times that the US politicians said one thing and their actions completely the opposite of what they promised. So there's some positive information, positive sign coming from this meeting between the two leaders, the two countries, and the information from China's side is very positive. But I know you are very pessimistic. You are quite negative about the meetings. You don't really believe US politicians' words. So can you share with us your views on this visit?
You know, I hate to be a damper on this, and I was a little bit of a damper last time we talked, but I said that the San Francisco summit was, I had my doubts about the San Francisco summit, and I believe that I've been largely vindicated. You know, China's approach is always positive, it's upbeat, it's asking for respect, peace, cooperation, win-win, common destiny of humanity. I mean, this is just all of it is positive messaging, trying to bring out the best with the United States, finding ways to build common ground. Everything that China is proposing is about joint understandings, joint cooperation, managing differences, respectfully, constructively. All of these things are positive things that China is putting forth. And if you look at the US message, it's one of two things. It's how can we get our interests met? Or how can we push China around and insult it? Or, how can we make demands of China and wrongfoot it and delegitimate it in the global arena or for the domestic audience? And that's very clear what is going on. Anthony Blinken is a China bashing wind-up toy. You just wind him up or you put in the batteries and he's just at it again, over and over again. China bad, China bad, China bad. China is responsible for everything bad that the United States, that has befallen the United States. China is responsible for the US winning, for the US losing its proxy war against Russia. I mean, it's the US's fault because it simply shouldn't have even have gotten into that war, but it seeks to blame China for everything. And all of this, as I said, once again, has to do with hybrid war, information warfare. As I've said before, I think it's very clear that the United States is escalating to war with China. It is looking for war. It is doing information warfare. It's shaping the theater of war, shaping the environment, and it's constantly provoking. And as it's doing this, it's constantly playing Jekyll and Hyde. Goes to Beijing, may say share a few dumplings and have a few nice words with some people. And then before and after, it starts with insult after insult. It's constantly telling lies about China. And I've said that, this is a deliberate process. It's good cop, bad cop. It's Jekyll and Hyde. It's their strategy of counterinsurgency, armed social work, where you are, as General Mattis said, you are polite, you are professional, and you have a plan to kill everybody. I believe that they have a plan to kill everybody. At least they have a plan to kill the Chinese. I think this is very clear. And I see China working very hard to de-escalate, to engage with good faith. It reminds me of some of the dialogues that you saw during the Opium War. The Chinese officials would write to the British and say, we are giving you nothing but good, beneficial things. Why are you trying to sell us things that you know are harmless, that are illegal in your own country, and which we don't want? This kind of appeal to rationality. And you can see that the US is not listening to that. Or if they do, it's only a little pretext so that they can simply advance more and more in their aggression, in their encirclement, in their hybrid war against China. I hate to say this, but I think it's pretty clear this is what's going on.
Yeah, but I think deep inside, we all know what his real purpose is. And but still, we will find a ways to stabilize the tensions, because if there really is a war between China and US, it will hurt both countries, especially hurt peoples of both countries. And what I find hilarious is Secretary Anthony Blinken. He met with the China's Minister of Public Security in Beijing, and he posted a tweet saying he raised concerns about China's human rights record. The day he posted on his Twitter, we saw police brutally crack down students across states in the US. Yet he decided to raise concerns about human rights in China. Once again, you don't say about human rights violations in your own country. You ignore the genocide in Gaza, but you care so much about human rights in China. So, what do you make of his concerns?
Yes, I mean it's quite absurd. I mean, at this point, he's just parodying himself. I mean, he's being so absurd and foolish that, he might as well be just doing, a comic stand-up or something like this. It's really a farce. And he thinks that people are that stupid. He thinks that the viewing public, that the audience is that stupid. I mean, let's think about it. When, there were protests by students in China during COVID, nobody was arrested, as I pointed out. Nobody was brutalized. This was not a problem. One day, or just days after the students ask for reasonable demands, essentially, divest, be transparent, do not do research with Israel that, supports their war machine. These are eminently reasonable demands, and they have every right to make those demands if they have free speech. And immediately the response is to bear down on them, crack heads, arrest people, throw people down, go after professors, so the kind of absurdity of this. Let's not even get into the absurdity of the fact that, the United States is enabling what is one of the worst genocides of this current moment, and to be enabling and supporting a genocide, a real genocide, where tens of thousands of people are being killed. The bodies are piling up daily. And then to talk about human rights somewhere else, I mean, it just kind of boggles the mind. The absurdity, the gall, the brazenness is just extraordinary. And I think it's a really good object lesson because it speaks to the kind of deceitful, brazen, uh, out of touch mindset that this ruling imperial elite has. They are not people that are in ground, in touch with reality. They're not people who understand how they're being perceived. They're simply determined to speak and act and do as they will. And the rest of us, they consider just have to deal with it. As the neocons said, and they are neocons, they said, we make reality. We make up our own reality, and the rest of you just have to study it and deal with it.
And anything that you want to share that I haven't asked?
Well, I think it's just really important to highlight or contrast the difference between the real genocide, which is happening in Palestine, this heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, mind-boggling genocide, which everybody, should be trying to prevent, as opposed to this genocide fabrication that they are making up around China. Those two things are two sides of the same coin. Those who tell you absurdities are preparing you for atrocities. And those atrocities are both happening right now as we speak in Gaza, and they're being prepared, I believe, for China. This is why the entire First Island chain is being filled with missiles and troops and logistical preparation. You can see that the shaping of the theater, the shaping of the environment is very real, tangible, concrete. The US has placed troops on Jinmen Island, which is within visual distance of Xiamen. This is how close they're going. They're escalating with JAFAS, that's Japan, Philippines, US alliance. They're doing incredibly belligerent exercises. They've created JACAS, Japan, Korea, US alliance for war against China. They have AUKUS. NATO will be coming to, the Pacific soon. They're stitching all of these together into Asian NATO. They've sold Link 16, which is the US tactical data network, to Taiwan, which essentially allows them, in their own words, to create a coordinated transnational kill chain against China. And all of these things are happening right now. And at the same time, China is, trying to save the planet by greening technology. And the US is deadly opposed to this. We're on the side of global warming. We oppose China's, greening or creating sustainable energies because we can't be on top if that happens. This kind of extraordinary hypocrisy, this double talk, is really kind of astounding. But it's what is going on right now. And I've said this before, and I hate it when I say it, but I believe that the US ruling imperial elite would rather see the end of the world than the end of their imperial privilege and power. And I think that is the danger that we're facing. And that's why everybody of conscience has to step up to the plate, speak up, and resist this inexorable drive to war, which we can see most visibly from where we stand in the incredible demonization and attacks against China.
Thank you so much, KJ. I hope I can have you more often on this show. I'm sure there are a lot of things going on, and I love to share your insights on this channel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you.
Hey, have you signed up to my weekly newsletter yet? I've created a weekly newsletter on Substack. If you prefer reading news about China and other international pressing issues, if you want to look beyond the mainstream talking points, make sure you subscribe to my newsletter. You will have your news delivered to your email. Do you want to be a content contributor as well? If you want to get your articles, your stories, your perspectives being published, let me know. Here is my email box, jjnewsletter@hotmail.com. Let me know. If you prefer watching short videos, you can find me on TikTok. My name on TikTok is I am Li Jingjing. If you prefer interacting, discussing with people from all over the world, you can find me on Reddit. My subreddit name is News with Jingjing. If you prefer watching long videos, you can always stay here on YouTube. And I'm very active on Twitter as well, right? I will put the links of all my platforms in the description. I've been working as a journalist in China for more than 10 years now. I report stories related to China and also other international issues. But voices like mine are often being neglected, censored, or even attacked by Western mainstream media. I don't know, maybe one day these Western companies probably want to erase me from their platforms. So it's very important that you subscribe me on multiple platforms so you can always find me. Thank you so much for supporting me for such a long time. See you next time.